welcome to What I Watched This Week with Alec. My name is Alec. This is the first episode that I'm doing, so I'm sure that this will get more polished as I go and I try some things out. But essentially, in this series, I watch movies all the time. My wife goes to bed early because she goes to work early, and so I stay up and watch movies. And so I'll watch anywhere from 3 to 4 movies a week, and I want to talk about them because I don't have that many people that I get to talk about them with. So this week, I watched 4 movies. And we actually have a themed episode. Our first episode is going to be a themed episode. We have 2 double features. We have a Zack Snyder double feature and a Nicolas Cage double feature. Didn't plan that, didn't mean to. That's just kind of how it worked out based on what I was watching. So the movies that we are going to talk about, that I'm going to talk about, and hopefully we can start a conversation over, are Watchmen, Men of Steel on the Zack Snyder double feature. And then on the Nicolas Cage side, we've got The Rock and Matchstick Men. Now, I've got my laptop right here just in case I need to look things up if I forget names, if I forget directors or years. I want to give you a little bit of information. Just as a heads up, I will be spoiling some things. I'm going to do my best not to spoil the very end of the movie, the big turning point that we all love to know. I might spoil some plot points along the way. So if you are looking to watch these movies and you haven't seen them before I talk about them, skip this one. Come back to it after you've watched it so that nothing gets spoiled for you. Like I said, I'll do my best not to spoil the very, very ending. Let that be a little bit more of something for you to experience, but that's what we're going to do. Now, before I jump into the first movie, we're going to talk about Watchmen first. What I want to do, you can see I'm in kind of the corner of my apartment that has all my physical media. I've got all my DVDs and Blu-rays. I've got some of my PlayStation games. I am a huge, huge fan of physical media. I like collecting it. My collection isn't as big as some people's, but little by little, I want to kind of build those up, buying DVDs at thrift stores, buying brand new DVDs that, I saw in theaters and I can't wait to have. I have a little bit of a collection here. So what I want to do is actually start off every episode with a physical media minute. So that's what we're going to do. My most recent physical media pickups have actually been a couple of VHSs. I don't have a VHS player. I actually don't have any way of watching these, but I like them. I like the tactile version of them. This reminds me of how I watched movies as a kid, so I like to have them on my very bottom shelf here. I've got some of my favorite VHSs, and I grabbed a couple of them at a thrift store in the last week. So the 2 pickups, an absolute classic. You all know it. You all love it. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. One of the best movies ever made, one of the best action movies ever made. When I started becoming like a movie fan and kind of like, oh, I like movies. That's one of the hobbies that I would list in like my dating profile. Not that I don't have a dating profile, but if I did, it would say that I like movies. This is the first one that comes up, or one of the first ones that comes up. Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time. I remember my dad showing this to me when maybe it was a little too young. I think that's an experience that all of us have, at least all of us young men have, is watching a movie with our dad a little earlier than maybe we should have. Usually it's a rated R movie. Usually there's lots of blood and guts. Terminator 2 was one of them. The other ones being Rambo, First Blood, Gladiator. There's a couple of them, but I remember Terminator 2 very heavily. So having the VHS of this, really excited to. The other VHS that I picked up is a more recent movie that I saw only a couple years ago. It's called Way of the Gun. This is from the year 2000. It's directed by Christopher McQuarrie. Not a name that a lot of people would recognize, but he is the guy that's done the last couple of Mission Impossible movies. This is actually his very first movie that he directed. So, 2 decades before he did Mission Impossible, he did Way of the Gun. This movie is nothing like Mission Impossible. It's very different from that. It stars Ryan Phillippe and Benicio del Toro. There are 2 scumbags that are just kind of just eking through life, trying to do whatever con they can to get the next set of money. And they come up with this amazing idea to kidnap the surrogate mother of a billionaire. So a billionaire's trying to have a baby. He's hired this lady to have a surrogate baby for him. They say, hey, we're going to kidnap her, and we're going to hold her and the baby, the unborn baby, for ransom. What could go wrong? A lot goes wrong. The way I'm describing it makes it sound like a dark comedy. It is not. It is a gritty thriller. Great performances from Ryan Phillippe and Benicio del Toro. And then maybe an even better performance from Juliette Lewis, I think it is. who plays the surrogate mother. She pops up in a lot of stuff. That may not be a name that you recognize right off the bat, but she is incredible, and she ruled the 90s and early 2000s. She rocks. So if you haven't seen Way of the Gun, I think I watched it for the first time on Tubi. Free service. Check it out. Go to Tubi. Okay. That was more than a minute, but that's my physical media minute. So diving into the movies for this week. The first movie that I watched is Watchmen, directed by Zack Snyder. It's from 2009. And the reason I wanted to give Watchmen, this is not the first time I've ever seen it. I saw it, I don't know, maybe in like 2012 or 13. I was not one of the guys that like saw it when it first came out. But the reason I wanted to revisit Watchmen is because I've seen some, Instagram posts and memes going around lately. I think maybe even Christopher Nolan said this, but he said that Watchmen is an underrated masterpiece. So when Christopher Nolan says that, you're like, okay, let's give it a try. Especially, Zack Snyder, he's made a couple of really good movies. You go back to 300, that movie's a blast. I have a buddy who's really, really into his, I'm going to say this the wrong one. It's not Dawn of the Dead. It might be Dawn of the Dead. It's one of those of the Dead. He made a remake of that way back in the day. I have a buddy who really loves that movie. I haven't seen that one, but I should at some point. But more recently, right, he made the Justice League. The original one, a lot of people discount that because it got taken over. The HBO original, Snyder cut. And then he kind of followed that up with some stinkers, right? We have a couple of, Netflix. I can't even, I should have looked this up before I even started. Actually, I can probably click through it right here. But yeah, Zack Snyder, you either love the guy or you hate the guy. And it seems like a lot of people aren't super duper high on the guy. Rebel Moon, that's what I was thinking of, directly to Netflix. After the Justice League, he had Army of the Dead and then the 2 Rebel Moon movies that were directly to Netflix. I did not hear great things about that. But he's also one of those guys that's like, no, you can't just watch the original theatrical run. You have to watch the director's cut. And the director's cut is always better, especially when it comes from Zack Snyder. So all that being said, Christopher Nolan's recommendation, I was like, you know what? I haven't seen Watchmen in quite a while. Let me give it a shot. I hop on HBO Max, and you've got 2 versions of it. You've got Watchmen, the theatrical cut, and you've got Watchmen, and I think it's called the Ultimate Cut. So I said, you know what? I'm going to watch that one. It is 3.5 hours long, the Ultimate Cut, so I did not watch the whole thing in one night. I broke it up. I watched one the one night, or half the one night, the other half the second night. And just as a heads up, you probably don't need to watch the Ultimate Cut. I enjoyed it. It had a lot of good stuff in it. It's hard to know. It's even though I broke it up into 2 nights, there wasn't anything in there that made me go, oh, there was one big chunk in the middle that I knew wasn't part of the original cut. But aside from that big kind of subplot that stood right in the middle of it, there wasn't really anything that seemed like it was over or like over the runtime. It was hard for me to tell what actually got cut out of the Ultimate Cut to make the theatrical cut. And maybe that's because Watchmen, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm sure most of you know, is based off a very critically acclaimed graphic novel, right? So I think the Ultimate Cut was Zack Snyder saying, no, I'm going to make sure that everything that's in the graphic novel is going to make it into the movie, right? And that's why we have that big subplot in the middle that's basically just a kid reading his own comic book on next to a newsstand. That's in there when it definitely doesn't need to be in there if you're looking for a theatrical cut. That being said, as good as I think the extended or Ultimate Cut was, it didn't seem to have a ton of fat on it, even though it was really, really long. You can probably just watch the theatrical version. I think unless you're a big Zack Snyder fan or you're a big movie fan and you really want to see what the differences are, you probably don't need to watch the Ultimate Cut. If you're on HBO Max, go ahead and fire up the the theatrical cut. You won't miss anything. It's got everything in there that you need. But yeah, I don't know if I personally would go as far as to say that Watchmen is a masterpiece. But it does do a lot of things really, really well. And I should bring this up even before I jump into Man of Steel. Superhero movies. Let's talk about it for a second. I was a big fan of superhero movies when we were at the height of them, right? We're talking about the Avengers movies, Infinity War, and then, Endgame. I was on that hype train. That has really just like fallen off a cliff for me. I don't want to go see superhero movies anymore. I'm over it. But, in 2009, the superhero fatigue was not a thing. So part of me kind of looks at Watchmen and compares it to some of the more, I would say, low quality superhero movies that we're seeing nowadays. And it's better. It definitely is better. There's a lot more artistry. If my dad watches any of these episodes that I make, he's going to make fun of me for sounding pretentious. But there's a lot more artistry in this movie than there is anywhere in the current Marvel, I would say even DC slate, aside from maybe the Batman. And who knows, maybe that's because the source material is so good to begin with that as long as you stick to that, you really can't go wrong. But yeah, there's the use of slow-mo. There's a lot more. It really feels like a guy who's trying to create like a piece of art, and not just a piece of entertainment. Although it is very entertaining, it actually feels like there's a lot of love and care put into this movie. And it's not just, even though there's a lot of CGI, there's a lot of special effects, it's not just a brightly over-colored CGI fest with explosions and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of use of shadow that makes things very cinematic. The one thing that I want to talk about for this is the suits in this movie are really freaking cool. Obviously, Rorschach from the graphic novel to the movie is basically the same. However, Night Owl specifically gets a huge upgrade from the book, the graphic novel to the movie. I think his suit, I'm sure when the graphic novel came out, the suit was awesome, but the suit in the movie is sick. And the performances are all really, really, really good. Patrick, the guy who plays Night Owl, let me look his name so I don't forget what it is. Billy Crudup is Dr. Manhattan, great performance, although I could use a little bit less blue ding-dong. I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me on that. Patrick Wilson as Night Owl, great performance. Jackie Earle Haley, obviously as Rorschach, is such a good performance. The one performance that I would say I don't think really measures up to the rest of them is the gal that plays Silver. Oh, I'm spacing the superhero name and I can't find it here. And I have her name right here, but I won't say it because I think she's kind of wooden. I think she's kind of overacting. I think in a movie where everybody else is like raising their level, I don't think she quite stands up to it. But it's not like belief breaking, her performance doesn't like slow anything down or anything like that. I'm just being kind of hypercritical. The one thing that I will mention that I really, really like about Watchmen before moving on to the next Man of Steel movie is the ending. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil this, but I looked it up and there is a pretty big difference between the ending, not the ending, but the mechanics of the ending between the graphic novel and the movie. And I will say, I think that the ending that Zack Snyder and the writer, whoever came up with for the movie, better than the graphic novel. There's a mechanic in there that the bad guy, and I'm not even going to say who the bad guy is because it's a little bit of a spoiler. I hope you go watch it if you like it. The mechanic that's used in that ending makes way more sense to me, and it doesn't feel like it meanders into the subplot quite as much as the ending from the graphic novel. So, an underrated masterpiece? I'm not sure. But underrated, probably. Watchmen is pretty cool. And the one thing I will say too, before moving on, is the Rorschach's diary section where he's narrating is really freaking sweet. I'm sure that's pulled directly from the graphic novel. And if we're talking about superhero movies, The Batman that just recently came out with Robert Pattinson probably stole directly from Watchmen. So if you like those Batman journal sections of The Batman, you probably have Watchmen to thank for it. And as I transition into Man of Steel and talk about that one, I think that's going to be kind of a common theme. Like, were Watchmen, were the Man of Steel amazing movies when they came out? Debatable. Either you're a super fan or you're not. But it's kind of undeniable to think that they influenced superhero movies going forward. So, Zack Snyder, I'm not a super fan of yours. If you're ever going to see this, probably not. But I will give you mad street cred for influencing superhero movies going forward. Moving into Man of Steel. Now, I do very specifically remember seeing Man of Steel for the first time. Of course, with the success of The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, you see, oh, Christopher Nolan is producing a Superman movie? This is going to rock. This is going to be great. You know, back in 2013, I don't know who Zack Snyder is. I don't know who directors are. I just know that, like, Christopher Nolan has his fingers somewhere in this Man of Steel movie, so it's going to rock, right? So I actually saw the Man of Steel when it came out in the theater. It was actually at a drive-in theater, which might have been the last time that I've been to a drive-in theater. I can't remember having been to a drive-in theater since then. So I'm actually going to pause right here. I'm going to grab my water because I'm thirsty. I'll cut this out, rehydrate it back in. So yeah, I saw Man of Steel for the very first time at a drive-in movie theater. Might have been the very last time that I've been to a drive-in movie theater. I can't remember having gone since then. And it didn't impress me. It wasn't, and maybe that's because I went into it with this idea of The Dark Knight Rises, which was like the coolest thing I had ever seen. Up until that point, I thought it was going to be much more like that. And so yeah, having seen Watchmen, I'm like, you know what? Let's see if this other movie that I wasn't super impressed with back in, let's see if I get anything new out of it. And I kind of feel the same about it as I feel like I did back in 2013. I have a couple of really big gripes with Man of Steel. My first gripe is that this movie never really seems to settle into itself. And what I mean by that is that we open on Krypton, and I think that the fall of Krypton with Russell Crowe, I think that's a really awesome sequence, a really awesome set of scenes. And then we go directly into adult Clark Kent, and he's trying to find his way. And then we keep intercutting that with flashbacks of him either to childhood or to early adolescence. And we never really like settled down in present day. Because we keep moving back and forth between these different time periods, it feels like this movie is almost like a 2.5-hour montage. And that's kind of a bummer. That being said, the montage kind of aspect of it makes it pace really, really well. So even though it is 2.5 hours or whatever, maybe I don't know the exact runtime of it, it goes really, really fast. You will not be bored in Man of Steel. You'll start it, you'll be engaged, you'll be entertained, and then it'll be over, and you'll be like, cool, like that was awesome. However, it was really hard for me to like really settle into this movie and start to really like enjoy it and pick out the things that I really liked about it, because it was, like I said, really, really montagey. Now, that might just be my untrained eye, not really understanding, you know, the way this movie is edited or the way that this movie is paced. So if you have some insights on that I'm really just not seeing, point those out to me. I could be completely wrong. I could be completely way off base with this whole like montage take on the Man of Steel. So yeah, let me know. My other big gripe is with the character of Superman himself. Now, let me be very careful with what I'm about to say. I think that Henry Cavill is very well casted. He looks like Superman. He acts like Superman. And in the years since 2013, obviously he has become very beloved as Superman, you know. Famously, he didn't get the amount of chances that a lot of fans would have liked to see him get to play Superman. A lot of people were really disappointed with that. A lot of people would like to see him return to the Cape. It's not going to happen. We've moved on from that. That's a big bummer. I think he's very well casted in this movie, but I don't think that Superman is very well written in this movie. And the reason being, there are certain movies, and I think the Man of Steel is one of them, where the main character seems to be reactive to everything that's happening to him. He doesn't seem to be the main character of his own movie. Everything that's happening to Superman and all the choices that he's making as a result of them are highly reactive. And because of that, we don't really see him become this like character that we really, really love. I think we love him by default because he's Superman, because he's handsome, because he's a really good looking guy, because he's noble, because he's true. I think we like him by default, but I don't think that we ever really get a chance to like him and really root for him the way that we would in another movie because he's highly reactive. And maybe that's, building on this whole montage idea that I had, that everything's happening so fast, we keep cutting back and forth. I don't think that Superman ever becomes the main character of his own movie. And that's a big bummer because, like I said, I think Henry Cavill is well casted. I just don't think he's super well written in this movie. And again, I could be completely way off base. Maybe some Man of Steel fans will find this and be like, no, you're wrong. And let me tell you why you're wrong. I would love to hear it. I could be completely way off base. The best part of this movie, also before I say that, I'm not sure that Amy Adams was well casted as Lois Lane. And that's not just because of the red hair versus the black hair. I don't give a crap. That doesn't really bother me. And maybe it's because she was kind of reactive too. I never felt like, you know what, I take that back. She was more active and proactive than Superman was in this movie. She kind of seemed to be the one driving the narrative in a lot of ways. I just didn't really fall for her that I would expect to fall for Lois Lane, the same way I would expect to fall for Superman. Those are two characters that you really want to fall in love with, and I didn't feel that for either of these guys in this movie. I'm not sure if that's casting or if that's writing as far as Amy Adams goes. The best part of this movie, without a doubt, in my opinion, you might disagree with me, is Michael Shannon as Zod. Brilliant casting, brilliant writing. Zod frickin' rips. Michael Shannon as Zod is freaking awesome. He's sick in this movie. If we're talking about some of the best one-liners, like angry one-liners in all of cinema, one of my all-time favorites, if my dad watches this, I'm sure he'll agree with me, is the Am I Not Merciful from Joaquin Phoenix's Caesar in Gladiator. That's up there. Obviously, you've got Daniel Day-Lewis, I've abandoned my boy, I've abandoned my... Those kinds of angry, giant one-liners. I Will Find Him by Michael Shannon as General Zod freaking rips, dude. Michael Shannon is acting his rear end off in this movie. He is going above and beyond. He is... And somehow he's not overacting, but he's just giving it his all. He is the price of admission for Man of Steel. So, if you haven't watched Man of Steel in a long time, or if you've never seen it before, I would recommend Man of Steel on that alone. So, let's transition into the next movie that I watched this week, The Rock. This is a 1996 film directed by Michael Bay, starring Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery, and Ed Harris. Those are the three main guys. I'll talk about another actor that shows up in this movie that I adore. And essentially, Ed Harris is an angry general that is angry for the reason... He's angry because he feels betrayed by his country. The, armed forces men and women that he fought so hard to protect while he was in the armed forces have been betrayed. And so he says, I'm going to get revenge on the people who've betrayed me by stealing a chemical weapon and holding basically the United States for ransom. And if the United States doesn't pay this ransom, I am going to unleash this experimental chemical weapon on the western seaboard, it would be, yeah. And he does that by taking control of Alcatraz and holding all of the tourists on Alcatraz hostage and basically hunkering down on The Rock and saying, I dare you to come get me. So, the American government, what is their solution? Well, let's sneak into Alcatraz, right? And who's the perfect guy to do that? Sean Connery. Sean Connery is clearly the perfect guy to sneak back into Alcatraz because he once snuck out of Alcatraz. So luckily, we locked him up and threw away the key. And we're going to use him to sneak back into Alcatraz. And obviously, we need someone who's like the chemical engineer expert. Nicolas Cage to accompany him and the other soldiers that are going to sneak back into Alcatraz so that we can defuse this bomb, this chemical weapon, when the time comes. So, let's start off by saying this is a Michael Bay-ass movie. And, I think that's a good thing, in this case, right? 1996, we're going above and beyond. I know that also, like Zack Snyder, Michael Bay has been made into a little bit of a joke in the most recent years with Transformers and some of his stuff. But you know what? Michael Bay movies, unless they're 4 hours long, like some of the Transformers movies, and you're just like, oh, get me out of here. Michael Bay's entertaining as hell, man. Like, if you're just looking for a good, fun time popcorn movie, Michael Bay might be the man. And you know what? Let's talk about, let me talk about something that I really love about this movie. And, if you look at other Michael Bay movies in general, he has a style. Like, there are other directors, I'm actually going to talk about one here in a minute with my last movie, that directors that just don't have a style, they do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're chameleons. They do whatever they want, and they do it good, and they do it well. Michael Bay definitely has a style, right? He's got the hero shots. And the thing that I really liked about this movie, and I like about Michael Bay movies, and I think is missing from modern day cinema, is how freaking sweaty everything looks. Michael Bay makes everything look hot and humid and sweaty, and they're dirty and they're grimy. And nowadays, I feel like in action movies, everybody's pristine, everybody's clean, especially in superhero movies, but Michael Bay makes everything look freaking sweaty, and it looks freaking awesome. So props to him for doing that. Let's get this out of the way. Sean Connery as an old badass. I'm not really buying it, especially when they first reveal him. They pull him out of his jail cell, and he's got this really long hair that's hanging in front of his face, and he's like, I'm about to do my bad Sean Connery impersonation. He's like, they locked me away and threw away the, I don't really buy it as an old badass. I think that there's probably a better casting for that role. However, there's a couple of line deliveries that you're like, dadgummit. Thank goodness they got Sean Connery to say that line. That is awesome. Ed Harris kills it in this movie. And I think it's because Ed Harris is the most... Nicolas Cage has an Oscar, but Ed Harris might be the best pound-for-pound actor in this movie. And so he really plays both sides of this betrayed general, where he feels this duty to, protecting and preserving life, but he feels this ultimate betrayal that leads him to this thing, and he plays that really well. The best part of the movie, in my opinion, and actually the reason I wanted to watch this movie, I saw a clip on Instagram of this clip that I was waiting for the entire time I was watching this movie, is interaction between him and Michael Biehn. Michael Biehn plays the leader of the soldiers that are going to infiltrate Alcatraz, and they have this standoff, and I'm not going to say anything about it. Michael Biehn is a darling. I love Michael Biehn. If you don't know who Michael Biehn is, he's in the first Transformers movie. He plays, not John Connor, the dad of John Connor. Reese? Anyway, I'm spacing Michael Bihn's character in the first Terminator. He's in Aliens, the second Alien movie. He's incredible in that. He plays Ringo, Johnny Ringo in Tombstone, and Tombstone is one of my favorite movies ever. Michael Biehn freaking rocks, and he rocks in The Rock. The standoff that him and Ed Harris have, where they are basically just shouting their moral dilemma at each other, pure cinema. That's worth the price of admission. If you haven't seen The Rock yet, watch The Rock just for those two guys. And that'll transition me into my very last movie that I watched this week, Matchstick Men, also starring Nicolas Cage. Having watched The Rock, I was like, you know what? I've had Matchstick Men on my watch list for a minute. Time to finally watch it. So I popped it in. I thought for sure that I had the DVD of Matchstick Men, but I guess that I don't. So I watched it on Tubi again, another free service. Matchstick Men is starring Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell. And they are two con men that basically just prey on the elderly and the dumb to kind of siphon money away from. And Nicolas Cage has debilitating OCD. Now, this OCD leads him to link up with this therapist, and the therapist says, hey, tell me about your family. And long story short, Nicolas Cage is reunited with his 14-year-old daughter that he didn't even know existed. And that causes all sorts of problems between, the relationship with his partner con men, with the score that they're trying to set up. Now, the first thing I want to bring up, like I said in the last with, The Rock, Michael Bay definitely has a style. I was watching the opening credits of this movie, Nicolas Cage, Sam Rockwell. I'm looking for other names that I recognize, any actors. There aren't any other actors in this movie that I recognize right off the bat. And then it says, directed by Ridley Scott. And I went, huh? This is directed by Ridley Scott? Now, I know Ridley Scott, and I'm sure you know Ridley Scott for Blade Runner, the original Alien movie, Gladiator, one of my favorite movies of all time. But then if you look at like Ridley Scott's filmography, maybe I can just read off a couple of things here real quick. Ridley Scott to me is like such a, Alien, Blade Runner, Legend, Black Rain, Thelma and Louise, G.I. Jane, Gladiator, Hannibal, Black Hawk Down, Matchstick Men, Kingdom of Heaven, American Gangster. I'm skipping through some of them. Exodus, Gods and Kings, The Martian, The Last Duel, House of Gucci, Napoleon, Gladiator 2, and The Dog Stars, which is coming out pretty soon, I guess. Here's the point I bring up with that. Ridley Scott is one of those guys that I cannot put my finger on what makes him good or what his style is. Whereas I said with Michael Bay, or you think of, Scorsese, Tarantino, Michael Mann, those guys all have very specific styles and they don't deviate from it very much. They might do different genres, but they don't deviate. I cannot put my finger on Ridley Scott when it comes to his filmography. It's very, very confusing to me because, he's made some amazing movies, some of my favorite movies ever, and then he's made some stinkers. But what is it that makes Ridley Scott good? What is his style? I don't know. If anybody can tell me, if anybody has any ideas, please tell me because I really can't put my finger on it. So seeing that he directed Matchstick Men kind of threw me for a loop. Now, I really, really like this movie. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but there is a twist that I did not see coming, even though it was like a con man movie. Whenever you have like a con man or a heist movie, you're always like, okay, but what's the catch? And I was going, what's the catch the whole time, trying to figure out what it might be. And then the twist hit me. And at very, very first, I did not like it. I was like, that is a lazy freaking twist. I don't like that. That's lame. And then the closing scenes hit me and freaking dang it, the twist freaking worked. I hated it when it was first revealed, and then as the movie was finishing up and we get our resolution, we get our bow tied on it, the twist worked for me. I actually thought it was really pretty good. And it's because of the groundwork that's laid earlier on in the movie, I'm not going to say too much about it because that would give clues away to the twist, but what I will talk about is Nicolas Cage. I didn't talk about him much in in The Rock. This is exactly the kind of role that you want Nicolas Cage playing. Like I said, he is OCD. He has OCD, and not like the white girl OCD that's like, oh, I have OCD. And it's like, no, Jessica, you just like to put your stuff in a calendar and you like to put things in order. You don't have OCD. Nicolas Cage legit has OCD in this movie. And he has all these tics and routines that he has to do. He has these facial tics when he starts to get agitated. And there probably isn't anyone better for this role than Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage should be playing this movie. He's chain smoking. He is crashing out. When this role was written, it's hard for me to think that they didn't want Nicolas Cage for this role. This is the exact kind of guy that he wants. And when he meets his daughter for the first time, right, she is charmed by this. She's never had a dad before that she really loves. She's never had that father figure. And even though Nicolas Cage is out of his freaking mind, she's charmed by this. And the relationship that they form is very, very tender. I really, really like it. Which leads into the plot. And why things go badly and why things go good and the twist and all that. I don't want to give a lot away. I just want to say Matchstick Men, I recommend it. If you haven't seen it before, give it a try. Sam Rockwell, as always, is freaking good. He's got to be one of those underrated actors that is just good in everything that he shows up in. I watched a movie not too long ago. This probably won't make an episode. It was a very recent sci-fi movie. Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. I think that's what it's called, or it might be one of those things might be reversed, but he's good in that. Sam Rockwell is really good. He's always good. So if you like Sam Rockwell, if you want to see Nicolas Cage act exactly the way you want Nicolas Cage to act, Matchstick Men is a great movie. Plus, it's very charming. It's pretty heartwarming. And it's got a plot that will keep you guessing, and you'll have a lot of time. And that does it for what I watched this week. Watchmen, Man of Steel for our Zack Snyder double feature, and The Rock and Matchstick Men for our Nicolas Cage double feature. Like I said, this will get a little bit more formatted and good the longer I do it. I feel like I talked about Watchmen for a really, really long time, and the other one's not so much. But it is what it is. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you tune in for the next episode of What I Watched This Week, where I'll talk about 4 more movies and keep learning about it. See you guys.